Yo, welcome to another episode of Roundball Ramble. I'm your host, Corbin Ford. You can follow me on Twitter at CorbinNBA. This is part of the Sports Ethos family of podcasts, so check them out on Sports Ethos on Twitter at Sports Ethos, SPORTSETHOS, online, sportsethos.com. You can follow me on Twitter if you're so inclined. I'll say it again, I said it too fast. You can follow me on Twitter if you are so inclined at CorbinNBA. That's where you'll see my stuff there. And Roundball Ramble is a part of that. And guess what? We are less than a month before the trade season is over, and the deadline day is here. And with that, we're going to kick off the series I teased at the end of this year coming in, which was an NBA trade guide, where I'm going to have guests for every team come on the show, whether fans of the team, interested experts, whatever the case may be. And we're going to talk about the team as they stand right now, pieces that are available to be moved in terms of whether that's players, whether that's draft picks, players that we deem tradable or most likely gone, players that we deem untradeable or untouchable. I mean, obviously the Clippers aren't going to trade Kawhi Leonard, for example, as we talk about the Clippers today. I'm not bearing the lead, of course. Favorite trades that we like for these teams, least favorite trades that we see all over Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, anywhere else that we don't like for these squads. And then last but not least, team trade predictions, whether we think that the team will stay active, whether we think they will be more reactive, or whether we think they will stay put. And so that's more of the general baseline that I'm approaching these NBA trade guides with, as we have different people on to talk about these teams exclusively. And so for the very first one, I'm happy to have on author, scout, former basketball analyst, consultant, all-around great guy, Richard Liu. I want to say consistent guest, recurring guest, friend of the show. That's what they say for folks that I always want to keep having come back on. Richard Liu is here with me. You can follow him on Twitter at RVLHoops. Definitely make sure to check out his Substack as well. Great content there at richardliu.substack.com. Both pieces of information I just shared will be in the description of this show, so definitely make sure to check that out. But without further ado, I've talked here for nearly 3 minutes. Richard, how are you doing, sir?
Doing great. Yeah, great to be here.
Always happy to have you on, man. I definitely appreciate you taking the time to come on and also being the first guest of the NBA Trade Guide. It just has things worked out. We were already talking, and it was like, hey, I'm trying to kick it up this weekend. Are you interested in picking a team? You said yes, and here we are. So I'm really happy and want to thank you for taking the time again to come on for that. And let's talk about some Los Angeles Clippers. The Clippers right now, as it stands, had a lot of hype going into the season, just how deep they were, hopefully healthy Kawhi, hopefully healthy Paul George, PG, and what they might be. And what they are right now is sixth in the West at 22-21. And I'm going to kind of throw it over to you, Richard, to kind of give your thoughts on the Clippers as they stand right now, just what you like, what you don't like. What is this team?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to kind of get a read on them just because they've been kind of the team that's been like the poster child for children for load management. So they're not always at full strength. So that's why they're only about a game over 500. Really not pushing for like a top record, but they just kind of want to get into that top six so they don't have to play a play-in. And in that and so you see that their potential sort of in like little short bursts and flashes. And so, in the few times where they are fully healthy, you get to see what they have to offer on on display, where you have Kawhi, you have Paul George, and you have basically almost like 40 to 50% of all the like quality 3-and-D wing guys in the league are on that team, and they all switch and they switch, they play aggressive defense, they space the floor, and they can hang with anyone, and so they can hang with anyone. So if it's always matters is if they can get to the finish line healthy, they can be a factor in the playoffs. It's just, there's just a lot of time left to do that. So, but, they're still in position, especially kind of with the Western Conference being a little more wide open than it has been, just because the Warriors they've had their struggles on the road. Steph missed some time due to injury, and their bench hasn't kind of gelled the way that it was expected. And so they're kind of a little bit down. Phoenix has had some injury issues with Cam Johnson. Also, they all have had to deal with Jay Crowder holding out for a trade. And then but then there's a new group of sort of younger contenders that have emerged with New Orleans, Memphis, Denver, and then Dallas, where they're the teams right now sitting in the top 4 slots, but they're still kind of unproven, and so it's still a question mark as to how they're going to fare sort of in the playoffs. So the door's still open for this team, because we've seen them sort of, at times sort of over the last 2 or 3 years where you can see them they show the potential to make a finals or a title run, but they just haven't been healthy and they've been healthy. They haven't had sort of the right breaks. So it'll be interesting to see how they approach this trade deadline, because I think they really are probably one piece away from really being a solid contender this season.
I agree. And it's kind of weird to say that, because you looked at this team going in, you're like, okay, the West is kind of wide open. Obviously, don't bet on against the Warriors. The Lakers had a lot of offseason turmoil. You didn't know where they were going to stand. The Grizzlies, the Mavericks, all these other squads were pretty solid. We need the Jazz blew it up. So we expected that there would be some turnover in this Western Conference. But, surely the Clippers, just with the top 2 talent that they have, one of the deeper rosters in the league, or so we thought kind of going in. We thought that they would come out, with good health, of course, and really have a chance to kind of take charge in this West. And so the fact that it hasn't happened, like you said, Kawhi has kind of slowly came back into form, especially with his outside shooting. I don't think he's had enough lift on his jump shot. His 3-point shooting hasn't been super great this season. I think it's warming up a little bit better now, but this is a guy that is shooting exactly 30% right now this season. So not super great. Paul George has been playing amazing. He's just been dinged up, nicked up and out, right? And then the point guard's position between Reggie Jackson and John Wall, let's just say, has a little bit to be desired as well. It's just been a team that's up and down. They can't seem to string together any consistency, and I think that's been the issue for them. And you said it, like the fact that you look at this team and you're like, wow, they're about a piece away. It's like, okay, that's not that bad in the grand scheme of things, because a lot of teams right now are in that quagmire of being a piece away in this parity that we have all over the NBA. At the same time, looking at the team, we thought they would be the most ready to be a set it and forget it type team, But as it is, I think their biggest issues, obviously, their star players are rarely available at the same time, always in and out. You've had a roster that has a lot of wings, but unfortunately, this isn't Wingstop. You need to have some guards. You need to have some more centers. And at the end of the day, I just think that their offense is also kind of frustrating.
Yeah, it's like, they've really struggled on offense. They're like bottom third of the league.
It's crazy.
Their defense, their defense has really been like, kind of holding them up. They've stayed, they're still the same, top 10-ish, defensive team, and that's going to be what they're going to, hang their hat on in the playoffs. Yeah, but the real main issue with them is the point guard spot, where it's just, where they just haven't had sort of a consistent guy who can sort of get Kawhi and Paul George the ball and also be a threat to score themselves, where with Reggie Jackson, you have a guy who can, gives you a little bit of a scoring threat, is a credible floor spacer, but he's not always, his distribution skills are somewhat lacking. So there are going to be times where, he'll try to, put a shot up when, the ball probably could be going to Paul George or an open shooter or Kawhi. And so you have some kind of clunkiness on offense with that. But then, if you go to John Wall, he's a much better distributor, but he's not nearly the shooting threat. So then, you get some spacing issues, especially if he and Zubac are on the floor at the same time. And so then it's like, you kind of, you're always kind of missing something no matter which one of those guys is in the lineup. And then, so that's kind of where you can kind of see, like, that's like the spot they definitely probably should consider. They would need to upgrade over, in the next few weeks. And so then that just comes back, you kind of scan the league, and I guess, you kind of, the team I've always kind of circled back to and kind of looking at, like, okay, who could they target trade deadline wise is Utah, because Mike Conley kind of fits kind of what they kind of checks almost every box of what they need, where you need that sort of steady veteran hand that sort of can run a team, get the ball where it's supposed to on offense. He's a good, get reliable 3-point shooter, solid enough defensively, so he fits into that sort of switching kind of scheme that they run. So that would kind of be pretty close to the, ideal player, a little bit older, on the older side of things. So kind of puts them, kind of a little bit of a risk there, but, but then it comes back, but then, the challenge is that Utah is better than we all expected. So availability is an issue, but then there was a report that came out that, almost everybody is on the table except for almost everybody for Utah's on the table except for Markkanen and Walker Kessler. So, this is Danny Ainge, where, he's more, kind of ruthless and rational than probably most GMs. So he's probably not going to get caught up into the emotion of kind of where the team is now. So if the Clippers, made the right offer, it could work. And so one, like, idea that I kind of threw out was basically, it was a kind of a way to sort of to allow Utah to sort of stay competitive, but then they get an asset or two for the future. So it would be some kind of combination of Reggie Jackson, Luke Kennard, because they have kind of some extra pieces, especially when it comes down to playoff situation, where Luke Kennard, great shooter, but kind of in the playoffs, his minutes get reduced just because of the defensive kind of because he's just not quite the defender that the other players are. So you kind of have this luxury piece that's great for the it's great for the regular season, great for the regular season. It helps them manage the long schedule, but in terms of trying to win a ring, it probably as a way to add to a trade without needing to give up draft picks that they actually don't have, because they traded those away to get Paul George. So in order to sort of increase the value in trades, you probably have to combine, Jackson, Kennard, add a young guy like Brandon Boston, and then maybe, if they got to outbid someone, they probably have to throw in 2029 or 2028 first rounder with some protection.
Something like that,
Yeah, if they get, so to get, say, Conley, and then, maybe if there are some extra pieces that they could get, as well, like, they could use a backup center just to split some minute, just so they don't overwork Zubac and, in sort of, kind of against teams that have like bigger bodied players. So Udoka Azubuike might get thrown in. If you need a shooter to sort of like situational shooter to replace Kennard, you get Simone Fontecchio, and those, so that's like a 3-for-3 sort of framework could work. Yeah. But then it's like if there's a chance you're aiming higher, now that also kind of Toronto is a little bit slipping and kind of falling out. But again, they're actually at a place where we don't know what they're actually going to do as far as sell or buy. And so like if they actually are thinking of selling, then Fred VanVleet kind of also fits kind of the same kind of description that Conley does. And then you have the added benefit of, two added benefits. One is he was an all-star just as recently as last season. Mm-hmm. And then two, he has, there's pre-existing chemistry that would allow him to fit in with the Clippers because he's already been teammates with Norman Powell and Kawhi on the 2019 Raptors. So it may actually take, it would take, some lighter protections on a first round pick. Maybe they'd have to add in a swap or something to try to get VanVleet from Toronto. But along those lines, those two guys are probably the targets that would make the most sense for them at the deadline. And so
I like that. Yeah, I think that what you're kind of giving is a kind of baseline set of players that, if targeted, can actually help the Clippers and is more or less realistic. A lot depends on, like you said, what Utah does, what Toronto does. Both those teams kind of being in flux. They could go either way, right? So yeah. I definitely agree with you there. And I guess I have to ask you this. Would a John Collins or Bogdan Bogdanović make sense? If it was, let's say, Robert Covington and Amir Coffey for Collins and maybe Justin Holiday or Kennard for Bogdan. What do you think about that? I mean, I don't know if it works really well for Atlanta unless they're looking for more shooting, but also going younger.
Yeah, it would go younger, but I don't see that as like a definitive upgrade given that we've seen like flashes of what this group can do, like especially the 2021 playoffs where just before Kawhi got hurt, it seemed like they kind of some things started clicking into place where they would they could go big every for a few minutes with Zubac and then just completely unplug their center position and just go with go to small lineups with Batum and Marcus Morris. And now, it's like if they, they added Covington with the intent that they were going to, they could kind of just do that. They could sustain that for a longer period, like for a few more games or even a whole series going that way. So if you're really, it's like, I don't know if it makes sense to really subtract from kind of the group that's going to make up the most of their rotation to, maybe try to hedge their bets a little bit on the health of Kawhi and Paul George when healthy, if they're healthy, they're, two of the better players in the league. So I think, if it's for them, it just comes down to this, like, they have their system, they have their chemistry. It's just this one little weak area that's kind of causing them a little bit of difficulty. And so it would probably make more sense just to try to find those upgrades there and maybe try to see what they can deal from their sort of a little bit from their surplus to try to just make that little addition. And then as far as, a guy that might make sense that actually could be available might be if they, again, like smaller deal, like Kennard, Boston, maybe some draft picks go to Detroit for Alec Burks, who kind of fits kind of switchable wing. His playmaking has gotten better.
More playmaking, yeah.
His playmaking has gotten better. His spacing, defense, and so like if they could maybe get him to kind of throw, kind of experiment with him into their point guard rotation to try to improve their ball movement and kind of just make sure the ball goes where it's supposed to, and that would be an option to consider for them.
I like that, definitely. I think that's another interesting one as well. Like you said, Alec Burks does give you that. I mean, he played point guard. I don't know if it was super great, but he did last year a lot of that. In Detroit, he's been a big help in terms of being able to fill it up quickly, kind of be that veteran presence on the team where maybe it's utilized more with the Clippers because he can kind of be, a wing-sized playmaker. Then that puts less pressure, that gives less pressure to both Paul George and Kawhi to both score and facilitate and let them be in their more natural mode. Not that they both are not great passes as well for their own, for respective positions in their own right, but it allows Kawhi to just focus on scoring, PG, not to have the extra playmaking load as well. And then maybe it gives a little pressure also off of both Wall and Jackson to be what they are. I think Jackson, like you said, is more of a traditional point guard. I mean, not Jackson, Wall is more of a traditional point guard, while Jackson is definitely more of a scoring-focused, floor-spacing shooting guard. So I definitely agree with you there. Looking at the Clippers, I mean, we talked about some hypothetical trades. We talked about some of your favorite trades you like for them. What are some trades that you've seen or heard that you're not a fan of? That you're like, I don't really see that being a thing.
Yeah, I think usually I'd kind of say anything. Like, I think like anything that involves that doesn't involve the point guard. Like, I think this one spot just kind of just sticks out in terms of just like this one area, this one position, this one role just kind of sticks out so much. That if you're trying to, switch out any other part, it kind of doesn't make a ton of sense, just because also it's like the parts that you're subtracting, the parts that you're adding in aren't necessarily dramatic upgrades over, anyone you'd be subtracting, so it's like, because a lot of their team is, kind of built on kind of this idea of just having all these versatile players that play, they kind of play multiple positions on the floor. They guard multiple positions. And so getting kind of taking one of those guys, even one or two of those guys away and kind of going to something a little more kind of traditional, kind of goes away from kind of what they like to do, what Tyronn Lue likes to do with his lineups, where it's a guy that is a guy who kind of likes to kind of mix and match depending on what the opponent is doing, what kind of the situation on the floor is, and for the most part, this roster kind of allows you to do that, where you can you got multiple options if you want to go 5 out small, where they can kind of go with either Batum, Morris, Covington kind of at the 4-5, and then just kind of mix and match, kind of put Kawhi and Paul George in two of the wing spots, then, whoever you got left with Norman Powell, man. And so then, so it gives him options based on, who's got a hot hand or, who's a better defensive matchup. And so if you kind of anything that kind of subtracts from that is kind of something I'd kind of have second thoughts over. Yeah. So then, but then, it just comes back to the one area where they just haven't, again, they just kind of don't have a reliable option is really, this point guard spot, where it's like, if you could, just kind of get someone who can manage the game, run a team, get them into their sets and do, execute execute how they're supposed to. It kind of makes everything kind of work a little smoother. And then, then kind of the other pieces kind of fall into place, because then you can, especially for someone like maybe John Wall, who might fit them a little bit better with his size, kind of playmaking, and where he can kind of be a little bit more of that sort of change up sort of change up to, for their second unit where it's like, you can still kind of do some things, transition, distribute, and then, as long as, Wall is kind of not is the only non-shooter sort of on the floor if he plays with 4 other shooters, then you get some kind of effect where, like that, an effect kind of similar to how, Rajon Rondo kind of had this effect kind of for the Lakers kind of in the bubble playoffs and,
taking over in that way.
And that's, or, it's kind of what, to an extent what Draymond Green does with like the second unit with Golden State, where it's kind of, he's the setup guy. And then kind of, he has kind of shooters around him that he can kind of go to. So, you can settle John Wall more into that kind of role rather than have to sort of overextend himself into kind of a more like a borderline starter. It can kind of, you can kind of get, an improvement that way too.
I like that. So basically just not taking away from the identity of the squad.
Yeah, that's basically.
You want to make sure, you want to make sure whatever you're doing, you're preserving the style they play. Now, I mean, mind you, how this is, I guess, more of not a roster construction question, but I want to ask you, Richard, with the type of play they have, obviously a jump shot heavy team, specifically a mid-range heavy team. I mean, if you look at most of their top guys, they definitely reside there. Most can stretch out to 3, but this is their bread and butter. However, when you don't have your 2 elite shot makers in Kawhi and Paul George, it's harder to win that way because their diet of shots is just not a great diet, to be specific. So is it worth changing it if you're able to diversify your offensive shot distribution so that it works with Kawhi and Paul George but also can thrive without them? Or do you think, hey, this is going to go as far as Paul George and Kawhi anyway, so just keep what we have there at all costs?
Yeah, I'd probably it's probably just it's going to go as far as those 2. But if you can find I guess this is where of the 2 guys that I say would be targets, Van Vliet might take, kind of might right now be like the top candidate, just because, if you get someone like Van Vliet, who was, again, he was an all-star last year. So like he has, some experience kind of carrying kind of kind of playing at a higher usage level. So it's like, maybe it's like if you get someone like Van Vliet where where you can have him operate kind of in a higher usage role, kind of in kind of situations where like, Kawhi and Paul George are resting, or if they're just, so they can, so it kind of gives him a third guy sort of in certain situations, but he can still also kind of blend in and play his role. But yeah, I think, because I mean, if we're looking at kind of, figuring out kind of how they play without kind of their 2 stars, they just really kind of don't have the assets to trade for another guy that can really move the needle enough. So it's like so with the construction they have, they're going to go as far as those 2 guys kind of can take them, if they can stay healthy. So that's, so more or less that becomes the biggest concern is that, it's just, make sure, trying to just get them in one piece, as they get to the playoffs. And so, but, then the secondary thing is just, kind of finding a consolidated rotation that sort of can actually help them win games when they get there. And they're really close. They're really close as constructed. They're just, again, missing this one piece that just can kind of help them on, can improve them enough on offense where they can score enough to make that, kind of keep up with teams. And then it, also, can give their, can allow them to rely on their defense as they kind of move forward.
I feel that, definitely. I mean, at this point, I guess it seems so straightforward, Richard, because, I mean, we know what they are. We know that there's not a lot of pieces that are going to be moved. We talked about players. I mean, I guess there's one more question I'll ask you before I kind of get to my final question. But we went through some deals, and kind of feel like they're more or less going to stay pat. Do you think there's any piece on this team, or any player rather on this team, that's more likely to be moved, or are we really sticking with, hey, this is the team they have? They're on this.
I think more or less, if they're looking at like who could be moved from the Clippers, it's likely like some of these guys that are kind of on the like fringes of their rotation. So there are some guys that just they're mostly kind of, set in terms of just their value, and that their value kind of around the league and a value to the Clippers as a team. So they're not, I don't see them subtracting from their main sort of group of sort of rotation guys. So that's a group of 7-8 guys that probably are not going to get moved. So probably, they're not moving Kawhi, not moving Paul George. It's probably not Zubac, Norman Powell, Morris, Batum, Covington, Terrence Mann. Those guys don't seem like would be moving. And I think, Terrence Mann recently signed, an extension that's going to kick in after it's going to kick in sort of next season. So there's a little bit of a salary increase that's going to be kind of make it kind of the trade math. Mm-hmm. The trade math kind of difficult to kind of go to, little difficult. So he's probably, safe. But if we're looking, Reggie Jackson's has an expiring contract. Luke Kennard is kind of, is in play just because he's usually kind of the guy, like when they've made kind of their, when they made their playoff run in 2021, where, again, he had a great regular season, but then when it comes to, teams that are opponents trying to match up Hunt, he's usually the target. So it kind of puts him kind of on the more on the outside of their playoff rotation, so he could be in play. So Jackson and Kennard are kind of the guys that would be, there would be kind of the main kind of bait in terms of salary matching and kind of adding value, because they don't have many tradable draft picks to kind of work with, because a lot of those are either going to Oklahoma City, or they can't trade them for Stepien rule purposes.
Yeah.
And so then if we're talking just young assets that teams are going to, like rebuilding teams are going to value, Brandon Boston is probably the main guy that they can dangle, and kind of that, that kind of also might be kind of an equivalent to like he might be like kind of the equivalent to like, a late first,
like
late first, and then they actually would have
young scorer type.
Young wing guy that, if he got minutes, on, a team like a Detroit or, Houston or something, you could see, him, vastly kind of improve just by virtue of the fact that he wouldn't be blocked by all these guys that are.
The depth is almost an indictment on these young guys, because you mentioned, I would say the same between like a Jason Preston.
Yeah, Jason Preston. Yeah, where he's also like we talked about point guard being kind of a little bit of a weak area, but with Reggie Jackson, John Wall, and the fact that they are trying to be a contending team, Jason Preston's just blocked and not. So that that's another guy that they could again, if teams kind of see the upside in him, that's another guy that can that can be a little bit of a deal sweetener, and then they actually can trade either their 2028 or 2029 pick, and if they whichever pick they don't trade, they could always include a swap on that. So it's really just kind of like the more or less kind of the package is there. It's just a matter of like, is this going to be enough to actually close a deal? Close a deal, considering maybe other teams might have more draft picks in play, or things. But
yeah, and that's something to think about too. Like you would say, like the gap between the best we can offer these two young players who have potential that you might put on par with the late first round, to say a future first rounder that's protected from a team that's worse. You know what I mean? Or if you're a team evaluating the Clippers offer and other offers, it's almost like, just use an example from a team I'm close to, the Lakers. You know, even if the Lakers say, okay, we'll throw in both of our first round picks and I don't know, Russell Westbrook, or if we're doing a Kendrick Nunn and Pat Beverly salary contract. Let's say we're throwing all that for a Zach LaVine or a Bradley Beal, if a player was available like that. That's the Lakers' best offer, where other teams could do the same first-round picks and some actual, prime young talent, and they don't close the gap between it. I think that's a similar allegory here with the Clippers. And, their best offer, they're trying to not trade away, as you're saying, a player of their team that's getting regular minutes, and they're throwing up these young guys. Okay, great, but is that going to be close enough to Team X's offer? That's the question.
Yeah, and so that's so largely I think that it's with the Clippers are probably there's going to be they're going to be more selective in sort of what they're going after, because it's like, again, they largely kind of want to see how how this group actually does, at full strength, and with Ty Lue as the coach instead of Doc Rivers, and so it was so
you're great for his part. I think some of the rotations have been weird, but for the most part, he's still one of the great tacticians in our league.
Yeah. So, but it's so with that, trying to get basically, as close as get to full strength and be able to maintain that level. Also, just if they can make a deal that just just kind of raises that ceiling, just that extra whatever 5 to 10% they need to kind of just get out of the West and kind of take their chance, take their chances if they actually do get to the finals. Then that's they're just kind of really just kind of looking for that last sort of piece to make everything work. And so that's kind of more what they, what they probably, that's probably what
more
what they're going to do and what we should expect. I was going to say.
Oh, no, I was going to say, you took my last question I had for you, Richard, which is this. The Clippers, as far as a team trade prediction, do you think that they're going to be active? Do you think they're going to be reactive? Or think they're going to stay pat?
I think, if a deal like this isn't made, I think they kind of are going to. I don't think they're going to make a trade to make a trade for person. Yeah, I think they're
sake. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they're just gonna. Yeah, I think they're not going to be active just to be active. I think if they can get this, one kind of final piece. Yeah, I think they'll do it. It's just a matter of can they actually, are they actually going to execute and actually close a deal. And if any of, if the right player is actually going to be available for them to actually acquire. And so that's where I think, it's either, they're kind of in the little more of the, they'll probably, take a little more an approach kind of on the conservative side, where it's they're probably not going to really do anything too drastic, but they can make this addition, and kind of sub out some parts that are a little bit sort of less extraneous than they can, and just kind of make this little subtle but impactful addition. That's what they'll do.
That makes sense. I get that. I mean, basically, listen, if you are a Clippers fan and you are also a fan of the trade machine, those two will probably not go together this trade deadline.
Yeah, unless it involves Mike Conley and Fred VanVleet.
There you go. Exactly. So
one of those two guys.
Definitely look at that, because that's going to be interesting. If those two are available, and you're right, the Clippers will definitely put some pieces out, probably take some feelers, because both those guys are interesting upgrades on the team. Mike Conley, I would think more short term. I definitely would be high on Fred VanVleet long term, though. But this has been a great little primer on a team that we don't expect to see a lot. If they do make a move, it's either going to be a very, very small move, or it's going to be some fireworks. That we can definitely agree on for sure. But Richard, thank you so much for coming on, as always, giving your insight and helping out here with this and being the first guest of the inaugural Roundball Ramble NBA Trade Guide. I really do appreciate that and your insight as well. Tell the folks, the fine people, where they can find you, your work, your Substack, all that good stuff.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter as at RVL Hoops. Yeah, usually I have updates on all the content that I put out.
Great stuff.
I'm on. You can kind of search for my name on Amazon. They'll lead you to my author page, and that leads you to all my books, all my my past draft almanacs, my past preview almanacs. I'm on Substack. It's called the Addendum, and the link is my name, richardlou.substack.com, and then I put out kind of content to kind of as I go, anything I kind of find interesting that I want to write on, kind of put it out there. So yeah, once again, at RVL Hoops on Twitter and richardlou.substack.com for the Substack. Yeah,
definitely make sure to check out all of his work. Have quite a few of his books. Love his stuff there. His Amendum, the Substack, is great. He actually has a Buyers and Sellers series, I think, just kind of wrapped up recently, right?
Yeah, I wrapped that up kind of over the holidays. So yeah,
so, very good stuff. Detailed work and like the guy has experience. Richard knows his stuff, so definitely make sure to check that out. But you can follow me on Twitter if you're so inclined at Corbin NBA. Check out Sports Ethos and their network of shows and content all across the board: basketball, baseball, football, gambling. You have disc golf now. Like, disc golf? What? Check them out on Twitter at Sports Ethos, online, sportsethos.com. Listen, y'all, there's been a great show. Plenty more of these to come, 29 of them, in fact. So definitely make sure to keep an eye out for that. But that will do it for this episode. So for Richard, for myself, we are Frosty. Y'all stay frosty, and I'll talk to y'all real soon. All right, y'all.